What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Lexi J Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Lexi Johnson. This is my husband and co-host, Brett Johnson. This week, we're going to talk about building solid habits. Some things that are, talked ad nauseum in the personal development space, but it's much simpler than we make it into our heads. I think that oftentimes we overcomplicate implementing new things into our routine as kind of a cop-out. Like, full transparency, I think a lot of the reason that we overcomplicate it is purposeful, just to make it harder than it needs to be in order for you not to follow through with it. So we're going to make it very simple. We're going to make it very actionable. Talk about how we've built habits and how just some real life examples of using these tactics. So Brett, what is an example of a habit that you're working to implement right now?
Okay, so let's use this. I am working to build a habit of studying every night for my ground school.
Yes, Brett's taking helicopter flying lessons, and he has pretty much all of like the air school, the physical, clinical setting, you could say, when it comes to actually flying. And he has done very little of the ground school, which is the part that he has been putting off a lot. So that's the habit he's building right now, is just making that part of his routine, and it's been a trial.
Truly.
Yeah. One habit that I'm working on is not touching my phone for the first 30 minutes of the day. I was talking to Brett tonight at dinner. I have felt such like a prisoner to my phone recently, with my job being on social media on multiple platforms. It's making me just feel gross. That's the only way I can explain it. I feel like I keep catching myself reaching for that phone, even if it's not job related. And that's really frustrating to me. I don't like feeling prisoner to that. So I had once heard someone say that your inbox is a to-do list made for you by someone else. And I feel like that is so true. And that's not how I want to start my day. So I'm working on not touching my phone for the first 30 minutes at least. In a perfect world, it would be several hours. But that might be something that we dive into later. I'm reading a book called Dopamine Nation, and it's really, really having me want to go for a dopamine detox. So no screens. I want to just be in a secluded cabin, give me a bunch of books and a ruck, and leave me for a week. That feels like the ideal situation right now. But we have lots of experience with building solid habits. I would say that we're in the above average, I would say, in building and sticking with habits. So that's another part of the puzzle, is not only just putting them into place, but also sustaining them long term, which you and I are very creatures of habit. So, that's kind of I was going to say it's in our nature, but I don't want to say that because it makes it sound like it's something innate. And I don't believe that it is. I think it's definitely a skill you can cultivate, not a trait you're born with or not born with. Mm-hmm. Would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah, I think at this point it just plays into the skill that we've cultivated over time.
Yeah, because most of the things that I do now from day to day that are strictly out of habit, I wake up and I have my coffee and I read and we visualize together. We do all of those activities kind of parallel. We make our coffee, we come downstairs, we sit on the couch and we read independently, and then we visualize independently. But those are things that, Lexi 5 years ago probably would have laughed at. And she would have been like, "You're freaking narc. What a loser." Because I wasn't very mature. But thankfully, I've cultivated some skills to build those habits.
Yeah.
And they've served me well so far. The visualization, just real life example, before we even get to putting, nuts and bolts of building a habit. But visualization, I have a real life example of it. This past weekend was our Lexi J Wellness 3-year anniversary event, which I'm still just riding a high on. I feel like I don't know where to go from here right now. I just want to relive it. We're 48 hours from the weekend, and I'm still just soaking it all up. It was an incredible weekend. But If you weren't there, if you didn't see me spamming Instagram, I'm pretty sure the servers were down on Sunday night due to the Lexi J Wellness community. But it was really, really cool. So I have been visualizing for months and months on end. Up to this event, I've been visualizing my speech and visualizing that auditorium being filled with people, just my community, and wearing the shirts that I saw them wear. I had also visualized something that I hadn't told anyone really but Brett about, that Andy Frisella was going to talk, and I was going to surprise the crew with him. And that was all things that I had sat on this very couch for months and months, just imagining in my head and walking through how it was going to feel, who was going to be there, what that space was going to be like. So for that to be something that I kind of lived in my head for months and months on end, and then to actually walk into that auditorium where everyone was clapping and to get to introduce Andy Frisella to my community as a surprise, like that was incredible. And it was, I mean, now it gets me excited to visualize and kind of recalibrate. That was definitely like a short-term thing that I just wanted to experience, that way I could, pull it off as seamlessly as possible. But to step into that space that I had been putting in my brain for months and months was really, really cool. So that's definitely a habit that I struggled with at first, and I still kind of struggle with it to an extent, just because it for sure takes practice. You feel awkward, you feel uncomfortable for a long time. But now that I've had a taste of what it feels like to kind of see the fruits of those labors, that's definitely going to be, that's reinforcing, which I guess we could go into actually like the structure of a habit. So,
okay.
The structure of a habit. Also, if you've never read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, I couldn't recommend it more. James Clear in general, sign up for his newsletters, follow him on social media. He brings a lot of really solid points, and puts it into terms that are very simple, easily digestible, which is how I like to approach any sort of advice.
Yeah. It's so interesting to me that there's such an audience on such a basic, such a large audience on such a basic thing. Because before we even jumped into this, we were contemplating whether or not to even have an episode on this, because it seems almost it seems like people just overcomplicate it, and it's like, do we really spend a whole episode talking about habits? But clearly it's something that's on people's minds, and it's something that interests people, because Atomic Habits is one of the best-selling books, like for sure of 2022, but probably still up in the ranks. I don't follow that sort of thing, but I know that it's sold a ton of copies. So I think that it is something that is very relevant to what people are thinking about right now, and it's something that can benefit a lot of people to hear about.
Yeah, and habits are always something that people are going to be implementing. Like, we take for granted a lot of the things that are habits for us now, but once weren't. And you have to remember that like everyone is starting out, but also you and I are practicing these actively, just on different habits. But I think that, yeah, we were kind of like bouncing back and forth of like, we could probably wrap this episode up in 5 minutes, just because it is a very simple concept, but it's one that every single person could benefit from, just because habits are not something that you just like master and you graduate from. You're constantly cultivating and like developing those skills throughout your life and adding on to it. I think about it like a power list. Like, once you have implemented one and it just becomes routine, then you kind of put something else on the roster. Mm-hmm.
Right. Whenever a goal becomes like a standard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the nuts and bolts of a habit are very simple. It comes in 3 parts to simplify it. You have a cue or a trigger, whichever you want to call it. We'll call it a cue. You have the habit itself, the action that you're putting into place, and then you have a reward. And this triggers your brain both to instigate the habit, to initiate the habit, and then it kind of signifies that the habit has been completed, and it gives your brain a reward, that response that, hey, you did a good job, you've done this. So there's this really interesting thing about habits and the way that your brain works. So your brain has this neuroplasticity, and the way that you imagine it is like if you're walking through a jungle that's never been walked before, then it's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of work to get through that path, to make it through that path. But if you do down and backs on that same path over and over and over and over again, then you've worn the path, and it's much easier to to continue that path, if you're following me, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So you no longer have to like push all the weeds out. You don't have to bushwhack your way through these trees because the path has been weathered so far that now it's like old hat. So that's the way that habits are in your brain, actually. The first, and I'm not going to put a number to it because I'm sure that it varies from person to person, but when you're first implementing habits, it is swimming upstream. It is climbing uphill. It's very difficult because you're making like this new terrain through your brain. You have to kind of forge this path for the very first time. And then the next time you do it, it's going to be pretty difficult still, but it's going to get easier and easier because one, you're gaining experience. You're gaining the confidence that you know that you can do it because previously, before trying it, you had zero experience to rely on, which means you have zero confidence in yourself to complete that habit. But the more often you do it, both it instills that confidence of knowing that you can complete it and you can continue to do it, but it's also that it's forging a path through your brain. Like, it is scientifically proven that the more often you replicate these actions, the easier it becomes to replicate. So you're doing yourself a favor by continuing to string those habits together consistently. It makes it a lot easier. But if you start and you stop and you start and you stop and you're streaky with it, then you're pretty much, it's like forging that path all over again. And it's really difficult. And then that's why it feels like it's a lot harder for you, because if you continually start and stop and start and stop and you have to reinitiate that habit over and over again, you're starting from day one, you're not starting from more experience with that weathered path, then it is going to be more difficult.
Yeah, it's a great analogy.
Thank you. So a cue, a habit, and a cue, a habit, and a reward. So a very simple one that has made me a morning person, the cue, very simple. Your alarm goes off. The habit is you put your feet on the floor. Once you put your feet on the floor, like, the rest of the day begins. But it's really that split second decision of taking the blankets off, like getting out of the comfy bed, put your feet on the floor. And then my reward is my protein coffee. Like, I look forward to that every morning. I go to sleep excited for it. That is something that genuinely can get me out of bed and get my day going. And it's very simple. It doesn't have to be anything like extravagant, or maybe your reward is brushing your teeth because you hate morning breath and like your mouth feels gross. I don't know.
Right. It can be, it can be a positive thing. It doesn't have to be go eat a cookie out of the cookie jar. It's you don't have to have like almost a negative, reward to counterbalance.
Yeah, we had talked about this once in the Lexi J Wellness Book Club. We were reading, I can't remember if it was when we were reading Atomic Habits or not, but someone had said like she was talking about getting her steps in by the end of the day. And a lot of these examples I'm going to use are like physical fitness, just because that's kind of my wheelhouse, obviously, but they can be implemented in any number of fields. But someone had said my reward for getting my steps in is taking my makeup off at the end of the night. She's like, I don't like the feeling of makeup, which I can definitely relate to. I don't like that feeling either. But she said, as soon as I get my steps in, I can take my makeup off and then I can go to bed. And it's so simple like that. It doesn't have to be a monetary reward. It doesn't have to be getting your nails done, because that feels like, that's something that you can't do super regularly. So make sure that if the habit, and a habit should be something that you do pretty consistently, I would say on a daily basis, then it needs to be a reward that you can replicate on a daily basis, and that it can be sustainable.
Right. Yeah, it's not, if I do this, I get to buy a new car.
Yeah, well, like new pair of tennis shoes every single day that you get your steps in. Like, you're racking up a bill then. Another cue, habit, reward example.
So for me, let's say pre-workout is my cue. The habit is a workout. The reward is post-workout.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very reasonable thing to expect, the average person that works out, they'd probably agree with.
Yeah. And it kind of just like it circles back the end of that. It signifies this habit has been completed.
Right. Yeah. Something that's an easily identifiable, trigger point where it's okay. Here's my cue. And this means that this is going to happen next. Then you do that thing, and then you get to almost think about it. You get as you're performing this habit that you want to instill as something that's a regular thing for you. You get to think about the whole time you're doing it. Well, I can't wait to finish this, and I'm going to feel better about myself because I did that thing, and I get my reward at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. Shoot, I just lost my train of thought. You were talking. Go on.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. I thought you were going to cut me off there again.
Well, I also feel like your brain loves habit because it takes the question or the ambiguity of your day out of, like there's more concrete things in place. So there's less gaps to be filled throughout your day, which your brain wants security. It wants stability. So if you can fill your day or just the bulk of it with habits, then it helps so much with anxiety. If you're someone that struggles with anxiety, I would question like how much routine do you have in your day? Because I do think that's helped me tremendously, just having a set routine in place, and then you have less question marks throughout your day, which just the unknown brings a little bit of anxiety, brings a little bit of stress.
Yeah. So humans are creatures of habit. A huge percentage of your day is just basically this perpetual wheel of habits stacked on top of one another. Now, the question is, are these habits productive for you? And so now we get into the topic of habit replacement. And do you have a negative habit that you want to replace with a, positive habit, if you will?
That's a good point, because habits are not always positive. If you say you struggle to build habits, you struggle to stick to habits, maybe you're saying you struggle to stick to positive habits, because I would venture to say you do have a lot of habits in place, but they might not be serving you super well. But that's a good point, because just kind of I always recommend this, but take an inventory of your day. And if you struggle to sleep and it's because you're scrolling through TikTok until the wee hours of the morning, put that phone in another room and pick up a freaking book. Like, that is a habit replacement. It's so easy, and it's going to do you wonders. Another thing, like, I'm trying to habit replace so often, so many of them right now that I'm coming up with examples for, is replacing your phone, just because that's something that I am struggling with right now.
I think it's super relatable too.
Yeah.
The average person probably spends way more time than they even realize they spend on their phone, because most people don't even look at their screen time statistics on Sunday whenever they get that notification. But whenever it comes to these negative habits, so to speak, it's not always easy to identify those in yourself. So maybe it's like what Lexi was saying before, taking inventory of what your habits are. Maybe that comes down to you making a list, almost scheduling your day out and thinking, okay, well, not intentionally changing your normal day, but actually writing down what you did, throughout the day, and not fudging it, because whenever we have this uncanny ability to like lie to ourselves to try to make ourselves feel better. And if you truly take inventory of what your normal day-to-day schedule is, you'd probably start to figure out pretty quick what some of these negative habits are that you can start to try to replace with something that actually is going to further you in your pursuits.
Yeah, I had seen one of my friends that's also a coach. He had said, if one of my clients comes to me and says I don't have enough time to meal prep or to work out, then they better send me a screenshot of their screen time so we can back it up. And that's convicting, man. Just the screen time thing is hitting home for me. It really makes me want to chuck my phone out the window.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some more very common time wasters, but it is really hard for me to just to get past the whole phone thing, because I don't care what you do on your phone.
Just screens in general,
I don't know
like
if
whether it be
it varies person to person.
TV
If you
or
dick around on some app, Candy Crush or whatever BS people get on, or TikTok, scroll TikTok just mindlessly for who knows how long, Instagram, Twitter, whatever it is. Phones consume an insurmountable amount of time for just every human. So I was listening to this podcast. I told you about it earlier, and this is a little bit off on the side, so I'm branching off a little bit, but this is super interesting, and I think that others would find it super interesting. But I was listening to this podcast, and it was comparing and contrasting different generations. So we're talking about boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, and then basically this whatever this new generation is. We can't even really draw any data from it because it's so new.
yeah.
But whenever it went through each of these different generations and kind of unpacking the stereotypes and the misconceptions, bless you, the misconceptions associated with each of these generations, it's very interesting. I actually put it on my story, and if you want me to send it to you, just shoot me a DM. But Gen Z was the last generation that was really discussed. And it was hitting on the fact that Gen Z is notorious statistically for being unhappy, for being depressed, for being anxious, and not so coincidentally, Gen Z is the one that has grown up with social media and basically not known anything but the era of internet. And 2012 was the year that over 50% of people in America had a smartphone. 2012 also just so happened to be the year that Facebook acquired Instagram. In 2012, there was a stark difference in the percentage of people that reported that they were unhappy or depressed or anxious, and it's just, I can't recall off the top of my head this specific stat, but it was mind-boggling just how stark the difference was. And then comparing, Gen Z to the millennials and comparing it to Gen X, overall happiness-wise, it's really sad. And it's overall, the conclusion can be drawn that people spending so much time on their phone, social media, and not interacting with actual people, it's having a profound effect on everyone's happiness.
Oh, I believe it. Yeah. Just the longer I mean, I'm on my phone an obscene amount of time, and I was just thinking, like, habit wise, kind of to tie it back in, if you were to pledge like 10 sit-ups for every time you opened up a social media app, how many sit-ups would you be doing by the end of the day? I would be freaking shredded.
Yeah. It would do a lot of people a lot of good.
And maybe that's something that we need to do, just to kind of like, just be honest with yourself. You don't have to post it on social media. Pledge to do something. That is an if-then statement. If I open up Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook, then I will do 10 lunges. Then I will do 10 squats.
Right. There's going to be a positive effect in one of two ways, if not both. Either one, you're going to start to begin to realize just how much time you spend on social media and how often you open the app without even really thinking about it. Or two,
you get a juicy booty.
you're going to get shredded.
Yeah. Yeah. Try that if-then statement. And that's another thing that James Clear talks about in the book, like stacking habits on already kind of solidified things into your routine. So if you get to your office and you immediately check your email, and then I don't know, every time you check your email, if you're wanting to get steps in, I was going to say like take a lap around your office or something. I don't know. what a great one for that is. A way that I have it stacked when I was in college, and I always use this example because it worked really well. It wasn't necessarily the greatest intent for it. So I just wanted to be skinny. I was a cardio bunny at the time. Like, I just wanted to run my body away. If I turned sideways, my goal was to disappear. And I got really like, I was never a runner before, would never have claimed to be a runner. But I was like cruising. Like, I would minimum 6 miles a day at a good clip. Like,
Yeah, you were running full.
I'm talking like I would run 6 miles at a 7:30 pace, 30-second 7:30 pace, easy.
Quick clip.
Yeah. Like, no big deal. But I told myself, because I was obsessed with the show Scandal at the time, that I would only get to watch Scandal if I was running on the treadmill. There were several days when I would run 10 miles on the treadmill just because I wanted to keep watching that show. So if you're wanting to get your steps in, but you're a TikTok scroller, or you are really liking a show, like, make yourself a promise that you can't let yourself indulge in that habit without completing a habit that actually serves you, that promotes your goals, that is going to further your growth. Because you don't have to cut out all of those things cold turkey. Although I would, like, right now I'm wanting to cut out a lot of those things, but meet yourself where you're at and know that if there's going to be some sort of breaking point and there's going to be some sort of progression forward, you have to you have to put those wheels in motion.
Yeah. Yeah, really, it just comes down to identifying the thing that you want to do, or the thing that you want to replace, with something that's more positive, and making something that seems sustainable, because it has to be something that you're actually going to stick to. Right. As well.
It is important to note, because, like, even though habits that we have are sustainable and that we've stuck to them, it is not going to be something that you just jump out of bed stoked to do every single day. Like, there are so many days when the last thing I want to do is work out. The last thing I want to do is get out of bed when my alarm went off, or send the emails that I had promised myself I would get done today, or fill in the blank. Like, there's growth in mundane. There is so much growth in the boring things. But once you get to a point where it has become boring, that's great, because that means that you have continued to execute long enough where it's part of your routine. So you have to understand that, one, in the beginning, it's going to be tough, because remember, you are literally rewiring your brain to understand that this is going to be a path we travel often, hopefully. And then 2, once it becomes a solidified habit, there's still going to be days when you don't want to show up, and that's okay. But you still need to show up in order to keep that, that streak alive, in order to keep those firings happening in your brain. Otherwise, it's just going to be harder, and you're delaying another start date, and that makes it really, really tough.
Yeah. And I think it's worth noting as well that once it becomes a habit and it's just a routine part of your day, if there is a day where, shit happens, things happen in life where you get thrown off your routine for whatever reason, if it doesn't happen that day, you come back the next day and you get back at it, and it feels normal to do so. You almost missed, being able to do that thing. I think we often take for granted just being able to perform the daily tasks that we get to perform, because it becomes such a mundane thing. And whenever you lose that, when you lose your routine, you go out of town, you get kicked off your normal daily schedule for, again, whatever reason, then it gives you this little glimpse of appreciation, of gratitude just for normal. Normal is great. I think that normal is 100% overrated, and I live for normal.
Oh, I love it.
I live for normal.
Recently, over the past few months, like, I would every single week for the past 2 months. You've been
gone a lot.
Yeah. Maybe the past 2.5, 3 months. I've been gone 4 days a week almost. And it is killing me, because I love being in my routine, and it's making it a lot more difficult. So then when I do get back, I'm just constantly course correcting. But it gives me, like Brett said, it gives me such an appreciation for the routines that I have established. It makes me miss it. It makes me excited to go home. It makes me just eager to get back to it, because it feels good to feel good, and just to be in that flow. And like I had said, because I have a tendency for anxiety, like I kind of lean that way naturally, I guess. It feels good to kind of have an awareness or just an expectation of what's to come. Okay, this is done. This is what's coming next. And it's that cue, habit, reward, just repetitively that that gives my brain a little bit of an insurance plan and makes me feel good, navigating throughout my day, knowing that I know what to expect.
Yeah. And so many of our habits like coincide with one another. So whenever you're gone, it feels strange because I'm used to performing these things with you. I think that that's one of the cool things about like a relationship that's really in sync, is that like you get that sense of belonging with each other just by performing all these daily tasks with each other. And whether or not you really think about it in the moment, whenever you don't have that person by your side, it sucks, because then you realize just how nice it is whenever they are there, and how much you enjoy getting to do it with them. So I think that there's some value in that as well. If you can identify a habit that you can perform with your spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, so I think that that's also a great way to build on a relationship.
For sure. Yeah, I'm so glad that we both kind of dove into this personal development space at the same time a few years ago, and we've navigated it together, because I think that it would be a little bit harder if it would for sure be a lot harder if one person was all in and one person was, just getting started or kind of dug their heels in. But being able to do that in stride with you has made this one just so much more enjoyable. Our relationship is stronger, and it just gives you that confidence both in yourself and your partner, because I know I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do, and then I know Brett's going to do what he says he's going to do. Just you're reliable to yourself. And then I think that seeing that in your partner and knowing that they continue to execute on what they say they're going to do, like that makes him more reliable and more attractive in my eyes, because
I was going to say there's also a level of attraction to it, because like there's nothing sexy about like having a partner that blows off every responsibility or every commitment that they make to themselves.
Yeah, I don't care if you say you like bad boys. No one wants someone that's unreliable.
Yeah. There's nothing attractive about somebody who has low standards.
Oof. Okay, we're ending on that. Mic drop by Brett Johnson. There's nothing attractive about someone with low standards. Guys, I felt like we hit on a lot of really good actionable things. Hopefully you can take this and implement some new habits, or maybe it was the reinforcement you needed in order to solidify the habits that you're working on right now. But we appreciate all your feedback. If you've got any questions or suggestions for us, feel free to email those to us at
pod@lexijwellness.com.
Yes, or you can always DM us on Instagram. But until then, we will talk to you next week.